My son-in-law didn't know I owned the building where his business operated. He called across the office one Tuesday afternoon and told my daughter to come get her mother before his 2 o'clock arrived. I picked up my cookie tin, smiled at the young woman at the front desk, and walked out to my car. 3 weeks later, I changed the lease terms. He had 60 days to find somewhere else. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start where it actually started. Not that afternoon, but 3 years before it, when Jasper's landscaping company was about to collapse, and I made a decision I never told a single person about. I'm 67. I spent 32 years as a regional director for a pharmaceutical company, building territory, managing teams, flying to conferences in cities I can no longer keep straight in my memory. I retired at 63 with a pension, an investment portfolio I'd been quietly growing since my late 30s, and a grief so fresh it still ambushed me some mornings. My husband Duncan had passed 14 months before I turned in my badge. Heart attack. One Tuesday in March. 29 years together and then just nothing. An absence shaped exactly like him. My daughter Margot is 36 now. She's smart and kind, and she married Jasper when she was 31. He was 40, had run his own landscaping company for a few years, was ambitious in the way that confident men often are before life has genuinely tested them. I liked him well enough in the beginning. He had energy. He made Margot laugh. The company nearly failed in its 4th year. Overextended on equipment, understaffed, a major commercial contract that fell through at the worst possible moment. Jasper applied for a small business loan and was turned down. I know because Margot told me, crying, on the phone, at 11 o'clock on a Wednesday night. I didn't sleep much after that call, but by morning I'd made a decision. I had an LLC I'd set up years earlier as a holding vehicle for some investment properties. I used it to purchase a 3,400 square foot commercial unit in an industrial park 20 minutes from their house, $290,000, paid outright. I then had the LLC lease the building to Jasper's business for $2,800 a month, below market, though he had no way to know that. On top of the property, I structured $180,000 as a promissory note routed through an intermediary. He believed he'd finally found a private lender through a referral from his accountant. He hadn't. It was me. Why didn't I tell him? I've turned that question over more times than I can count. The honest answer is that I knew Jasper would refuse. He was proud in a way that could turn brittle under the wrong kind of pressure. And accepting help from his wife's mother was precisely the wrong kind. I also told myself it was simpler this way. Cleaner, no family dynamics muddying a straightforward financial arrangement. I told myself a lot of things. For 2 years, it worked just fine. The company grew. Landscaping contracts expanded. He hired 6 full-time employees and started talking at Sunday dinners about commercial accounts and city bids and a potential partnership with a property management firm. Margot had come on board doing the bookkeeping part-time. They seemed happy, or at least busy, which sometimes looks like the same thing. I visited once a month, usually Sundays. I'd bring something, pie, soup, flowers from the farmer's market down the road. Margot always met me warmly at the door. Jasper was cordial. He'd ask how I was keeping busy and then spend the rest of dinner talking about the business. I didn't mind. I was glad it was going well. The first crack showed up at his Christmas party. He'd rented a venue, invited clients and contractors, and a few city officials, done the whole thing up properly. Margot called and asked me to come. It would mean a lot, Mom, so I went. I wore the burgundy dress I'd bought in San Francisco years ago, which still fits well, and I thought I looked just fine. Jasper introduced me to a group of people as Margot's mother. No name, no mention of what I'd spent 32 years doing. One of his clients, a pleasant man developing commercial properties, started chatting with me about some financing terms he was struggling to understand. I started to respond. I knew the exact territory he was navigating. I'd sat across from CFOs for 3 decades. Before I could finish my first sentence, Jasper laughed and put a hand on the man's shoulder. "She's retired," he said. "Old pharma sales. These structures you're working with, it'd be a lot to explain. He steered them away towards someone younger, someone who counted and kept talking. I stood with my wine glass and watched them go. From across the room, Margot caught my eye and gave me a small, apologetic smile before turning back to her conversation. I drove home telling myself it was nothing, host mode. He didn't mean it as it landed. These are the stories we tell ourselves so the evening can end quietly. It wasn't nothing. 2 weeks later, I made what might be called a mistake, or maybe it was the push the whole arrangement needed. I drove over to the business office on a Tuesday with homemade oatmeal cookies for Margot. I'd called ahead. She'd said, "Come by around 2." I arrived at 5 past. The young woman at the front desk let me in and offered me a seat in the waiting area near the entrance. Through the glass partition, I could see Margot at her desk with headphones on, focused on her screen. I thought I'd wait until she came up for air naturally. Jasper came out of the back conference room with a contractor. They shook hands. The contractor left. Jasper turned and saw me, and whatever warmth he'd been running on for that handshake simply switched off. Like a lamp. "What are you doing here?" "I brought cookies for Margot. I called this morning." He looked around the office, at the reception desk, at the empty chairs, at the glass wall where Margot sat absorbed in her screen. He came a few steps closer and dropped his voice, but not enough. "I appreciate it, but this is a professional space. You can't just walk in." "I called ahead, Jasper," she said to come by. "Right." His jaw moved. "It's just you do this a lot. The dropping in, the checking in. Margot and I are running a business. We don't need someone hovering." "You mean well, I know that. But you have to start finding things to do with your time that don't involve us." He seemed to recalibrate mid-sentence, smoothing something out. "Book clubs, classes, whatever you enjoy. This," he gestured at me, at the cookie tin, at the air I was standing in. "This isn't your place. It isn't your concern." I began to say something. He'd already turned toward the inner office. "Margot," his voice carried through the glass. "Your mom is here. Can you come get her? I've got a 2 o'clock. My daughter appeared in her office doorway. She looked at Jasper, then at me. Her face did something complicated. Apology, exhaustion, and something else I didn't quite have a name for yet. "Mom," she said, "maybe today isn't the best." I set the cookie tin on the reception desk. "No trouble at all," I said. "I can find my way out." I drove home. I didn't cry. Grief had used something up in me after Duncan, and what remained doesn't spill over the way it once did. I parked in my driveway and sat with the engine off. The neighbor's dog was barking at a squirrel, a perfectly ordinary afternoon, carrying on. "Come, get your mother." He'd said it the way you'd say, "Come get the mail," a thing to be managed, moved, cleared from the path. And Margot had stood in that doorway and said, "Maybe today isn't the best." I thought about what Jasper didn't know. The building on Commerce Park Lane, the LLC on the lease, the promissory note with roughly $89,000 still outstanding. He had no idea where his monthly payments went. He thought he was paying a property management company and a private lender. He was paying me. I went inside and made tea. I opened my laptop at the kitchen table and pulled up the files I hadn't looked at in months. The lease, the note, the property registration, total invested in that man's business, upward of $380,000 when you accounted for everything. He'd told me to find a hobby. He'd said it wasn't my concern. I sat back in the kitchen chair where Duncan used to sit and read the Sunday paper, and I thought, he has no idea what his concern is made of. I gave Margot 48 hours, not because I wanted an apology, just to see if she would call. She did, that same evening. Her voice had the careful quality of person who has been rehearsing. "I'm sorry about today, Mom. Jasper's been under a lot of pressure with the expansion. He didn't mean it the way it came out." What way did he mean it? A pause. He just gets protective of the business environment. "I understand," I said. "Get some rest, sweetheart." I called Saul the next morning. He'd been my attorney for 21 years, handled Duncan's estate, my will, the LLC structure, all of it. He's methodical and honest, and in 2 decades, he has never once told me what I wanted to hear when the truth was something different. I drove downtown, sat across from his desk, and laid everything out. The loan, the building, the LLC, the arrangement, what had happened the day before. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he folded his hands. "What outcome are you looking for, Isadora?" "That's my name. I don't use it much in the telling of this, but there it is. I want my daughter to stop apologizing for a man who treats me like something that wandered in off the street," I said. "And I want that man to understand that the foundation under everything he's built is not what he thinks it is." Saul nodded. "Legally, you're standing on solid ground. The lease is clean, the note is enforceable. You can issue 30-day notice on the property at any time per the lease terms. You can call the note per the original agreement." He paused. "But there's something you need to see." He'd had a paralegal pull public filings. Routine, he called it. He slid a sheet across the desk. For 2 consecutive tax years, Jasper had filed his business returns listing the Commerce Park property as an owned asset. Not leased, owned. He had been depreciating my building. "He's claimed ownership of property held by your LLC," Saul said quietly. "If he's audited, he'll have a significant problem." I looked at the filing for a long moment. Whether it was ignorance or arrogance, I couldn't say. Maybe he'd been thinking of the building as his for so long the distinction had blurred. Maybe his accountant had asked the wrong question and he'd answered without checking. Either way, there it was. "I want the lease filing updated," I said. "Current date, clear ownership, no ambiguity on record. And the note. Hold for now." 3 days after that, Margot called again. A different call, rehearsed in a different way. Jasper thought it would be good for all of them to sit down together. Clear the air, move forward. "Of course," I said. "Tell him Saturday works, and tell him I'll be bringing my attorney." A long pause. "Your attorney?" "Just some paperwork I've been meaning to sort out. Nothing to worry about." I arrived Saturday with Saul. Jasper answered the door in a pressed shirt, the whole performance of reasonableness ready to go. He looked at Saul, then at me, and the performance flickered. We sat at their dining room table. Margot brought coffee. Saul set his briefcase down quietly and opened it. "Jasper," I said, "I'd like to talk to you about the property at 2847 Commerce Park Lane." The color left his face in a way that suggested some part of him had already begun to suspect something. He set his coffee mug down with great care. Saul arranged the documents on the table, the lease, the LLC registration, the promissory note, all of it in the morning light on my daughter's table. Jasper read everything. It took a while, then he looked up at me. "You," he said. "Yes. This whole time. Yes. Why didn't you tell me?" His voice had something underneath the question, not anger yet, something rawer. "Would you have accepted it?" We both already knew the answer. I watched him know it. Then the anger arrived, the way it does when pride has nowhere left to go. "This is control," he said. "You set this up to have leverage over us, over Margot. You've been holding this over our heads without us even knowing." "I set it up so your business wouldn't close," I said. 3 years ago, when the bank said no and Margot was calling me in tears, I found a way to help. I'm sorry I didn't find a way to do it honestly, but I'm not sorry I did it. You should stay out of our Jasper. It was Margot. She'd been sitting quietly since we arrived, both hands around her coffee cup. Now she stood, walked to the kitchen, and came back with a thin folder. She set it on the table in front of him, with a steadiness that surprised me. "Before you say one more word," she said, "I need you to look at something." I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, the set of her shoulders, the slight lift of her chin, something I recognized from somewhere deep and old. Inside the folder were printed bank statements and a page of handwritten notes in her careful, orderly bookkeeper's script, recurring transfers from the business account, $2,500 monthly, 12 months running, to a company registered out of state. She'd tried to trace it. The company had no website, no employees on record. The registered agent was a name I didn't recognize. 7 months, Margot said. I've been looking at this for 7 months. I kept thinking I must be misreading it. I kept waiting for you to bring it up yourself." Jasper stared at the folder and did not speak. "Is it an old friend?" I asked quietly. Margot looked at me. "How did you know?" I didn't, but that's usually how it goes. It was someone he'd known since college. What exactly the arrangement represented? Favors, phantom consulting, something else entirely. I can't say with certainty, and I won't speculate. What I know is that my daughter had been carrying that knowledge alone for the better part of a year, afraid of what it meant, afraid of what confronting it would cost her. She hadn't been waiting for me to rescue her. She'd been building her case quietly, on her own terms, in her own handwriting. She just needed the ground to stop moving. The meeting ended without resolution, the way real ones usually do. Jasper left the table at some point. Saul gathered his documents and stepped out to the porch to give us space. Margot and I sat at the dining room table in the quiet. "I've been thinking about leaving," she said. "I know." I didn't know how to start. "You do now, if that's what you decide." She looked at me for a moment. "Did you plan all of this to give me a way out?" I thought about that honestly before answering. "No, I did it to protect myself. The fact that it also opened a door for you, that wasn't strategy. That was something else." She reached across the table and took my hand. The formal notice on the lease was delivered by certified mail the following Wednesday. Fair market rent for that property was $3,400 a month. Saul offered a 60-day transition period, new premises, or a proper lease at market rate. Take your pick. The promissory note would be called after 60 days as well, unless they arranged refinancing. Jasper hired his own attorney. There were letters back and forth that eventually came to nothing, because there was nothing to come to. The building was mine. The documents were clear. His attorney told him the same thing mine had told me. He found new premises in 6 weeks. A larger unit in a better location, leased properly in his name and the business's name, arranged through a commercial broker. His business had grown enough to qualify without any help from me. He hadn't needed my support in some time. He'd just forgotten how the story started. The promissory note balance cleared through a bank refinance about 90 days after the notice went out. When the final payment posted, I made myself a cup of coffee and sat at my kitchen table and felt something I hadn't quite expected. Not satisfaction exactly, more like the quiet that comes at the end of a long drive when you finally cut the engine and the whole car goes still. Margot and Jasper went to counseling. That part isn't mine to share in any detail. What I can tell you is that they're still together nearly a year on, which tells me something real is being worked out between them, even if I can't name what. Marriages are their own country and I'm not a citizen of theirs. What I can tell you is that Jasper showed up at my apartment door on a Saturday morning about 8 months ago. He was holding a potted rosemary plant, the small kind they sell at the grocery store. He said, "I wanted to bring something." Then he stood there in my doorway for a moment. I said, "Would you like some coffee?" He said yes. We sat at my kitchen table for 45 minutes and mostly talked about the weather and a road construction project on the highway near their house. It wasn't an apology in so many words, but it was a beginning of something, even if neither of us has named it yet. Margot calls every Sunday now. Not out of obligation. I've known what obligation sounds like for long enough to recognize the difference. She calls because she wants to talk. We stay on for an hour sometimes. We laugh at things Duncan would have found funny. She's taken over the business finances with full transparency now, and she's also started a small bookkeeping side business. 3 clients so far, built entirely on her own. I didn't help her with that. I just told her she could do it, which is a different thing. I rented the Commerce Park building to a young woman who designs custom floral arrangements for weddings and events. She uses the warehouse space for large installations and the front office as her design studio. There are flowers in the window every time I drive past, dahlias, sunflowers, big loose arrangements in colors that catch the afternoon light. They remind me of the garden Duncan kept behind our old house before I sold it and moved to the apartment. The same particular quality of yellow. I finally took the trip to Ireland that Duncan and I had been planning for 15 years. 2 weeks in County Clare, a small rented cottage near the coast. I walked the cliff paths in the mornings and sat in pubs in the evenings where the music started around 9, and nobody cared how old you were or whether you were keeping pace. I cried twice. Once on the first evening, sitting on a stone wall looking at the Atlantic, understanding that I was exactly where we'd always said we'd go together. And once on the last morning, when I didn't want to leave. There are things I'd do differently. I would have been honest with Jasper from the start, found a way to offer the help without making myself invisible in the process. I understand now that what I told myself was protecting his pride was partly protecting myself from being refused. Those two things can look identical from the outside. They feel different on the inside. I would have told Margot too. She had every right to know what the ground beneath her was built on. But here is what I would not change. Picking up that cookie tin. Nodding at the young woman at the front desk. Walking out of that office without raising my voice, without making a scene, without letting him see a single thing on my face that he could use against me later. My mother used to say that dignity isn't something you fight for in the moment. You either carry it with you or you don't, and people see it in how you leave a room. I carried it. I still do. 3 weeks after he told my daughter to come get me, the terms of his world changed. Not because I wanted to punish him. I don't think I did. Not really. Not if I'm being careful about the truth. I did it because I had finally decided, at 67 years old, after 32 years of building things quietly and handing the credit to other people and making myself small so that the people I loved could feel bigger, that I was done being invisible to the people who should have been able to see me with their eyes closed. I hope that lands where it's supposed to. And I'd like to know, what would you have done? Would you have said something in that office the moment it happened? Or would you have waited, the way I did, and built your case quietly first? Leave a comment below. I read everyone. If this story reached you today, thank you for being here with me. You deserve to take up exactly as much space as you do. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise.